Welcome to Quilting's first reality show. Yes. Unscripted and live with Susan Smith. Yes.
Hello, and welcome. I'm Susan Smith, and you're in my studio, Stitched by Susan, for another episode of Live and Unscripted. Today's project is my fairly typical edge-to-edge quilting design. So right from the beginning of this small quilt, right from the loading, through the thread, the design choices, and then quilting the actual thing. So clarifying, as I often do at the beginning of these shows, they are streamed live, so there's no editing. So exactly what happens is what you see. If there's any issues or challenges that arise, you get to see me work my way through them. Also, it's not a lesson per se, and this is a client quilt. And so it's not chosen for its visibility on camera. So it's not intended to teach you the quilting design. It's intended to kind of give you that big picture view of how working through a whole quilt goes. Hence, you get to see the loading. You get to see the basting and some of those processes. But please don't fault me if I don't actually teach you the quilting design. That's kind of just a feature, but not the focus of the show, if that makes sense. So I'm so glad you joined me. I know that as a beginner quilter, this is something I would have valued, the opportunity to just be a fly on the wall, so to speak, when another quilter is working and just see, like, how often is it okay to break threads, or is it, or, you know, how clearly do I need to work out my design before I start quilting, or whatever the question may be. When you go to start at your machine and everything is so unfamiliar, it can seem kind of insurmountable, all those decisions. So I welcome you into my studio to just watch as I'm working on a client quilt. So a few thanks are in order. My husband, Dave, we call him Mr. Producer. He's behind the scenes and he's operating the cameras, the cables, the wires, the mic, and keeping all the things all the balls in the air, so to speak. And so we sure appreciate that. This is not a thing I could do by myself. So I appreciate him helping me on Friday, which is his day off, to do these live shows. Our good friend Dan graciously allows us to use his guitar music throughout, so that's what you'll be listening to as I'm quilting, and it's so lovely and relaxing. And no, I'm sorry, it is not available for sale. You have to come back and watch the show to hear it. And last but not least, our son Will does the voices in the introduction, and they vary from week to week. We have a few different ones, and so thanks to Will for doing that and making that intro kind of a fun thing.
I have to throw up a two-parter just because.
Okay, Mr. Producer's tossing up a comment here. Let's see. Okay, Roxanne, every time you say you have to do a dismount, I want to see you throw your arms up like a gymnast. Okay, I love that, Roxanne, because you're right. That's a gymnast term, the dismount. But you know, it also suits, it just fits for long arm quilters, right? Because it is a bit of a big deal. And sometimes you nail it and sometimes less so. Sometimes it's a bit challenging to get the quilt back on flat if it's a big one. But okay. While we're on the question of questions, when you do have a comment or a question particularly, if you would precede it with QQ, 2 Qs, that enables Mr. Producer to search for them. Sometimes there's lots and lots of comments coming through and the questions can get lost or diluted in there. And so if you put QQ in front of it, we can search for them and find them. So the way it kind of works is I'll get started basting and then quilting the quilt, and between passes I'll actually stop and we'll throw up comments and address any questions or comments that you have. I welcome your questions. Let's talk about the things. So I'm going to take one more sip of coffee and we're going to get diving into this project. There we go. Alrighty. If you want to be notified when these live sessions are going up, please do hit the like button first, the thumbs up, and the subscribe, and then click on the bell, and then you'll get a notification whenever I am live or whenever a new episode comes out. Okay, today's project is this lovely little quilt. It's from Shabby Chic Fabrics, and this is the pretty backing. We're on this camera, pretty floral backing. And the quilt was a kit from them as well, and you'll see when I load it, it's lots of similarly just soft and pretty florals. But I wanted to show you something particularly today. Well, several things really about the backing. Number one is there is a seam. It's running right here. This is often a consideration when you're loading a quilt onto the long arm. Does it matter if the seam goes horizontally or vertically? From the point of the finished quilt, it doesn't really matter. From the point of ease for you as a quilter, it's easier if the seam runs horizontally because it's got a little bit of pull to it, and of course it's got an extra thickness of fabric. So if it's running horizontally and it's a long quilt, you'll find that seam takes up more fabric and it's more difficult to get it to lay flat. but it's possible. And again, from the point of view of the finished quilt, it doesn't matter. So you just get to choose based on what you're quilting or what other factors are. For today's purposes, the design that I'm going to be quilting is directional. So it's not necessarily, you know, pictorial has a top, but one direction is different from the other direction, and I didn't want to make it sideways. So I'm going to be starting with the quilt is going to be oriented this way. So top of it will be up there, bottom of it will be down here, and the long sides will be this way. For various reasons, sometimes I choose to go the other way. It's a little more efficient in terms of passes, but because today's quilting design is in rows, I'm orienting it that way. So these are just the things that I consider when I'm deciding which way do I want my backing, which way do I want to load my top, and once that decision is made, on it goes. The other fun thing that I want to show you, this backing came sort of pre-cut in a package, and you can see all the fold lines, right? When I move this around, it's about, I don't know, 8-inch squares. It was folded into a small packet. I have purposely not ironed this backing so I can show you a really cool time-saving trick for not needing to iron backing. It's a long time since I've ever ironed a backing. There's no need to. I will show you. Well, let's get the front loaded first. So I'm grabbing my little red snappers from beside. I'm sorry, I step out of camera when I do that. I use the red snapper system, which just means in my front leader here, there's a little plastic rod, just like these snapper material, inside this hemline. And the rod that I've got in my hand then just snaps right over top of it. So all I need to load a quilt quickly is a straight edge here along the front. And I know this one's straight because it's a selvage edge. So that too can influence you deciding which way you want to load your quilt, because it's very handy to have a selvage edge on this front. Not necessary, but very handy. So that just snaps into place. And one more, is that long enough? Not quite. Got to do a long one. And I'm stitching today on a Bernina Q24. Her name is Stella. She's been up and working since early too. So I did take a few moments before I came on air to clean out the bobbin area free of lint, put in a drop of oil, get everything ready to go for today's show. Okay, there's a couple magical things going on here today. First magical thing is, you saw that I've loaded my straight line on the front. There is no need to perfectly square up my quilt backing. In fact, as you'll see, I think at this end, I'm the one that put the seam in it. Can you see it doesn't quite match up here? I didn't get it cut quite in half. That honestly is not going to matter. As long as I've got a straight edge loaded here, I'm going to roll it over the back leader and it's going to pull it into place nice and straight. So it's important that I get it pushed all the way over the leader and that I get it lined up so it's set to roll on nice and straight. So I don't want it pulled to one side or the other. Can you see how that forms funny lines in it? We want to avoid that. So once it's over, I'm going to grab my trusty spray bottle. This is just water, okay? And I'm going to lightly mist that whole backing. And this is what is going to magically release those wrinkles. So they will not entirely disappear, but they will completely relax so that I won't have a worry of creases forming in my quilt backing. And because this has fairly heavy creases, I'm misting it pretty generously. And then in the couple minutes that it takes me to finish loading this, those creases are all going to relax. And isn't that way faster than actually ironing it? Okay, that's done. Undoing my clips on my leaders. And now we'll start rolling it on. So I'm rolling from the front and I'm just watching. I'm keeping a weather eye on this area up here to make sure no creases are forming, and particularly where that seam is in place, I'm just giving it a tug to make sure it's all smooth. And now I'm just letting, basically the resistance of rolling over that back leader is what's keeping it smooth and straight and on grain. I can also watch at this front end. Can you see my hand? Yes. Watching my bar that is below, I can see that it's rolling on straight. So that's an extra check to know that it's good to go. And now I'm just rolling until I'm near the end of my leader on the back. And then I will come around, pop my red snappers on. I see this bottom edge didn't get moist enough. It's not relaxed enough. So I'm just going to grab my water bottle and spritz a wee bit more. Jeremy's commenting that life is too short to press backings. I'm in 100% agreement. Like, you absolutely want a quilt that does not have wrinkles on the back. Yes, you do. But if there's a faster way to get that, i.e. a spritz bottle, I am all for it. Some of you might be wondering if that moisture is a problem. And the truth is, if I was doing a quilt that was going to remain on my frame for a day or two, I would spritz it and then I would walk away for a little bit and let it dry. But in this case, because I'm completing this quilt in one session, even if it was a half a day or a whole day, I would not worry about it. I go ahead and put it on, still damp. And we have a loaded backing just like that. Isn't that easy? Love it. Okay, on to the batting. I am using today Winline's 80/20. And it does have a top and a bottom, so I got to get it right. There we go. So 80% cotton, 20% poly. Lovely, lovely batting. And I'm picking a few threads off because this actually was trimmed off from beside a larger quilt. It was kind of a leftover piece of batting. And here comes the sweet little quilt. Look at this. Isn't that cute? So all these soft, soft florals. And by the way, a mother and daughter pair brought me a pair of these quilts. So I have two of them. So the other one is probably not going to make it onto a Live and Unscripted episode, but I will quilt it in a different way. And I'll post pictures of what I do on that one. It's really fun, I think, to track quilts that I do where I have the same quilt and then put different things on it, just to show that that's entirely possible. I'm just going to move my quilt down from my red snapper a little bit. I'm awfully close to it up there. There it is. Okay, we're ready to baste. I chose to use just an eggshell thread on this. The white fabric is very white, but it's a white on white print, so there's shades of eggshell in there as well. And in fact, the eggshell thread that I use it on straight white fabric too. It seems to just pick up that soft color and be just fine. I also use it on pale pink, pale blue, pale yellow, all the things. The lady who quilted this, yes, her name, or who pieced it, her name is Jacqueline. She's actually a close neighbor. Oh, Jacqueline's commenting. Cool. Hi, Jacqueline. I love clients who are so willing to let me do these on air for those of you that enjoy watching them. So I am now basting up the left-hand side. Sometimes when I have larger quilts, I'm more diligent about either putting a channel lock on or pinning the thing in place. But on a small quilt like this, I tend to eyeball it. My machine is very good about, if I just gently push it, it stays in a lovely straight line. So I do want a straight result, but I find that that works well for me and I still get a straight result. If you need to take more effort to figure out how to make that straight basting line, you go for it. Here's another fun tip for you. My hopper foot, no matter how smooth and flat the quilt is, the hopper foot always wants to push a little fabric in front. So if you don't do anything, you're going to find that your fabric is pushing out in front of you and eventually pushing a little bit crooked. So all I do is put my other hand, usually it's my left hand, on the area that's already been stitched and put just a little bit of weight on it, and that pulls this fabric under just a touch. And that little bit of adjustment is all that's needed to keep it, what's the word? It escapes me. To keep it flowing smoothly under the needle. And if there is a little bit of excess in of fullness in the fabric, then I put a little more weight on and pull it under just a little faster. But even when you have a perfectly flat quilt, I find that you need to do a little bit of it. I always say that getting a really flat and square result is very cumulative. There are many places throughout the quilt making process that you can either run amok or improve the flatness of a quilt. And so as a quilter, I'm kind of the last line of defense. And so I like to really make the effort to try and get the flattest, squarest, smoothest result that I can. And every time I pause like that, I'm kind of visually checking. You know, is my side still straight? Is my corner still 90 degrees? Is my quilt frowning over my frame? You know, is everything still square and straight? And I just use the seam lines of the fabric to visually gauge that. There we are. So that's our basting. I basted up the left, across the top, and down the right. You can do that, honestly, in any order you want. That's just the most efficient one for me. But it is important then that I secure the front side. So I've got a floating top, we call this, where this end of the quilt is not getting rolled onto any roller. It's just hanging down in front of me. This camera. Boop, boop. There's my floating top. So what's important then is I don't want to be quilting this area and having it pull up in the middle, right? So I need to secure that fourth side. And I do that with these simple shop style magnetic bars. And they just clamp onto the rail. You can probably hear them adhering. And that's all I need to keep this front edge secure, and now everything's in place. Last thing is to attach side clamps to have just a little tension on the quilt from side to side. And by just a little, I mean a very, very little, just enough to keep it smooth, not enough to create a drum. And these are also by Red Snapper. They're called E-edge clamps. I love them because they're long and fill up the throat space and hold nice even tension across the quilt. And also they're a slim profile from top to bottom, so I don't bang into a chunky clip. All right. Let's take a few questions, and I'll get a sip of coffee before I dive right into the quilting, because I'm going to have to concentrate and pay attention to get my first row or two well established. Okay, let me move Stella off to the side, just a touchy touch. All right. Those of you who are regular viewers, how do you like our little side option for questions? It's kind of fun to have the little variety in the views, right?
It went away on one of them. I'm not sure what I did.
Mr. Producer lost one of the questions. Oh no. Melanie, need an easy peasy ETE for a newbie. Haven't taken the time to practice quilter. I get it. That's all the description of you. You know, loops and double loops are always a good solution, and you can easily dress up simple meandering loops by dropping in hearts or leaves or flowers or stars to, you know, if it's for a boy or if it's for an adult, or right, you can personalize it that way. So that's where I would start, loops. Okay. Another Susan. Could you explain what's the difference between edge to edge and custom? Absolutely. Let me take a sip of coffee because I need my hands. You know I do. There must be Italian in me somewhere. So custom quilting generally has to do with specific quilting in specific areas of the quilt. Might be a border, might be blocks, might be actual pieces. Edge-to-edge quilting is just the same quilting design from one edge to the other edge. Same thing, with no regard for the seams or for thread different colors or anything like that. It's just the same quilting design laid over the whole quilt. Now, edge-to-edge can still mean freehand, which is what I'm doing today, or it can mean following a pantograph and stitching from the back of the machine, or it can mean computer-driven, but still that edge-to-edge, same design over the whole quilt. That's the difference. Carol, recently unloaded a quilt completely from my long arm and noticed I forgot to quilt a small element. How do you handle this issue? It depends a smidge on the quilt, Carol. If you have red snappers like I do, you might be able to snap the quilt back on. It's difficult because it's thick. Otherwise, I would just attach it with pins to the leader. And you don't even need a whole lot of pins, just a few pins to hold it up, and then a few more pins wherever you're going to be putting that tension on and doing that quilting. And then take it off. It's happened to all of us, believe me, more than once. Dorothy, do you ever leave a space between the red snappers or must they be tight together? Oh, absolutely you can. Similarly to what you'd leave with a pin. Like I wouldn't leave a 4-inch gap or your fabric's going to pull, right? But 1.5 inches or 2 inches is doable.
2 parts.
Okay, 2 parts coming up. Nancy, my mid arm is tucked close to the wall and I can't load this way as I can't walk behind. Okay. Is it okay that I do it opposite? Load first from the back and then to the front bar? Absolutely. If you've found a way to make that efficient, you go for it. I found that my fabric wanted to pull off and flop out of place when I loaded the reverse way, but absolutely you can. If you found a way that works for that, go for it. Sherry, how did you get the red snappers to work with your Bernina? Love your show, have learned many things. Thank you. Okay. For starters, disclaimer, Sherry, they're not the Bernina recommended way to do it, right? And the fact that I don't roll on the top of my quilt is not either. So this is my choice, my preference. So just to make that super clear. The reason that there could be difficulty if some of you watching won't have Berninas, there is a dead bar or a leveler bar at the back, and my long arm is below it. And that distance is a specified certain number of millimeters. And the red snapper as a whole will not slide through under that. However, by raising it just a touch, like 2 millimeters, I was able to get that initial slim bar. It does slide through freely. So you'll see after I do my first pass, Sherry, and I go to roll it up, I'm going to push my machine off to the side past my thicker bar, okay? And that enables me to roll it through. I have not had any trouble with that. Where difficulty might come in is if you were to raise your leveler bar too much and your fabric was too high off the long arm frame and bouncing, you might get tension or stitch formation issues. So you have to be aware of that. If you're having that problem, it might be the way you've got your red snapper set up. But I have found this kind of happy medium where it's working really well for me, and I know others who have as well. So it is possible. Catherine, with the red snappers in your leaders, does it help keeping your leaders straight when rolling up your backing and quilt top? You know, Catherine, I've never had trouble keeping my leaders straight, so I don't know that I can really answer that. I've never had a problem. Even with my other brands of machines, that's never been an issue. If you are continually having a problem keeping the leaders straight, I would seriously look at whether your machine is squared up or not. Because I feel like if your leader is a straight edge and your machine is squared, it should roll up straight. That's my 2 cents, not knowing very much about your situation. Shelby, can you show how you break thread? Happy Friday. So happy to catch you live on my lunch break. I'll try and do that, Shelby, and if I don't remember it at some point, please tell me. But chances are I will, because I usually just quilt until my bobbin thread runs out, and then I do a splice wherever I may be in the quilt, and I assume that's what you mean by breaking thread. So yeah, I'll do that. It's not actually a snap break. It's just a stop. We call that breaking thread. Lynn, where can you get the magnetic bars? Lynn, there is a link in the description on Amazon, but in most cases you can find them at your local hardware store. They're just the type that you would find in a shop, a machine shop for hanging tools, or even for hanging knives in your kitchen. They're about 1 inch wide, and they're a solid magnet on the back. Watch your fingers. It's like the McDonald's hot cups. Item inside may be hot. You know, these may be magnetic and pinch your fingers, so like be forewarned. But they're awesome. Debbie, I was told the batting should be as wide as the backing. I see that yours isn't that much wider than the top. Is this something they tell newbies, or is that a general practice? Super question, Debbie. I believe that the reason for having it as wide as the backing would be because when you roll it up on your rollers, if it's not, wherever there's batting, it's going to roll snug, and past the batting, your backing will sag a little bit, right? I have various ways of combating that because I want to be efficient with my batting, and I don't necessarily want to cut off several inches afterwards and toss it away. So it'll probably happen today, and I'll try and remember to show you how I pull that up. And just be aware that that's what you've got to deal with then, is the looser backing that extends beyond that batting. But it's not wrong. It's not wrong. Are we good?
Nope.
Oh, More questions. Okay, we might have to stop at some point and just get quilting. Cheryl, how do you get the side clamps on so quickly? Well, partly a ton of practice, Carol, and also today I happen to have a perfectly flat and perfectly smooth backing. I do have a tiny video on YouTube that shows a couple of my tips for using those red snappers because they are a bit of a learned technique, but they're worth it. They're worth it. Linda, what weight thread and needle size are you using? Good questions. I have Isocord 100% poly 40 weight thread loaded in an eggshell color. It's 0101. I have the same thing, top and bobbin, and I have 9014 universal needles loaded. My Bernina machine, by the way, uses regular sewing machine needles, so it literally is a 9014 universal needle. It's not a long arm needle. Emily, it looked like you laid the fabric over the top, not under a dead bar. How did you do that? Oh gosh. That too, Emily, you might have to look back at other episodes. When I first got my Bernina, which was in January of 23, so into maybe February and March, I did a couple episodes where I was experimenting with how to do that. And basically, I flip my leader all the way over that back bar before I load my backing, so that when it flips back, it's under the dead bar and in the right place. So the leader goes under the dead bar and over the top. I attach my backing and then I let it flop back and it's still under that dead bar. It's a bit of a process, but once I figured it out, it works really, really well. Christina, how do you tell top from bottom of backing? I know that you must mean batting. I know there's a difference, not sure which is which. So not all battings have a top and bottom. In this case, it has a scrim, which is a super, super fine, almost netting that's stitched into it's needle punched into the batting, and it kind of holds it all firmly in place. And you can feel it, and there's a difference to the look, and that's how I tell the difference. But from brand to brand, that's different, and not every brand has that scrim. So just get some knowledge about your batting. Go to their websites, that sort of thing, to get some knowledge about it and how you tell. It's just, there's so many, and it's so different. Dottie, I'm sorry, Mr. Producer, I missed that one. I was too slow. Is there a way to see this video later? I have said, yes, absolutely. It remains live on YouTube. You can come back to it at any time and watch it, and it'll have a picture of this quilt. And June, love your videos. So looking forward to meeting you in person next year in January on the quilting cruise. Super excited for that. Good, good, good. I will talk about the cruise as we get quilting today, but I want to get us started for now, and I've got to concentrate on this first row because I'm going to be establishing some spacing. So I am now going to be stitching in regulated mode, and I just got to think this through for half a second. Okay. This design is called Chandeliers, and you'll see why in a moment. I established this first row just by guess and by gosh. But honestly, you could, if you're not comfortable doing that, you could figure out your spacing on a piece of paper or on a plexiglass sheet, and you could use any kind of marking pencil to, for example, drop in dots even on your batting that show you the spacing. I've got my circles. They're each of them about 3 inches wide, and there's close to an inch between. So it's about every 4 inches. And you'll see as I go how one layer is now just going to build on the one that came before. I'm debating whether I want to use blue painter's tape or not. I think I will so you guys can see it. If you're a regular, you know I love blue painter's tape for many, many things. But here is one of the things. It provides such a great visual guide when you're doing something that is row-based. Because it's a different color from pretty much every quilt you've ever done, your eye sees it without even really stopping to look. And so even if it's not right where the bottom of your line is going to be, it's a very, very obvious straight line. And it helps you keep things going in a straight line and not running badly uphill or badly downhill. The blue painter's tape is such a great tool. Did I anchor my thread? I can't recall. I have now. Okay, let's get organized here. So you can see the L's and E's coming into play. Now you notice that I broke thread at the end of the first row and went back to the beginning, only because it's like handwriting, because we're also used to writing from left to right. It was a little bit easier for me to get that the establishing row in place from left to right, but in fact for the remainder of the quilt I'm going to alternate directions and go back and forth, back and forth. That's up to you, but this is a great opportunity if you're not comfortable stitching in both directions. This is a great opportunity for practicing it. See the little chandeliers forming? And you may notice that I'm not quilting all that super fast, but my eyes are pretty constantly lifting from where I'm quilting and gauging my spacing, because I'm doing this all by eye. I don't want to have to pre-mark rows or spacing for these chandeliers, so I'm always looking ahead where I'm going to go, where the next one's going to droop to, centering it below the one that came above in the row that's above. Maybe even where the edge of the quilt is as I get to this side of it, to help myself land in the right place. So all of that takes a smidge of time. I can't be zooming with my quilting and hope to do all that looking, you know, at the same time. So I just slow down my quilting a little bit. I'm trying to decide if I want the tape for each row or for every second row. Let's try it for each row for a while till we get the hang of this, yeah? So you can see how easy it is to just lift up that tape and reposition it. There's so many horizontal piecing lines on this quilt. It's super easy to just look at those lines and make the tape similar all the way across. That's plenty accurate enough for these purposes. So I'm just dropping 3 little L and E shapes in each chandelier, and I'm doing a small one on each side and a taller one in the middle. And that's all this design is. So those of you who get my newsletter, I talked in it, I kind of told a story in it about my 7th grade teacher who buttonholed me and made me do handwriting drills. This is ever so much like those, not only in the fact that it's L's and E's, but also in the fact that if you do this type of quilting with thoughtfulness and consideration to each one as you're forming it, you can become really good and really controlled at not only forming your L's and E's well and symmetrically, but also even these dropped chandeliers. Doing that by eye does not come naturally to anybody, not even to me. That takes some practice, and this is where you get it, in doing designs like this and not just whipping them out as fast as you can, but quilting with care, quilting with intention. I'm pretty confident some of my students are watching, and I'm just curious if you have anything to say on that point, because that is something that I talk a lot about in my freehand quilting masterclass. This idea of your quilting time being also your time to be practicing these types of skills, so that you don't have to have dedicated practice time. You just quilt and build your skill building into that practice. And this design is just a fabulous example of that. You're learning how to make smooth L and E shade loops. You're learning how to make symmetrically beautiful chandeliers. All these things are built right into this design. By the time you repeat this over a whole quilt, you've had a lot of quilting practice. And a pretty quilt to boot. There may come a time when I'm comfortable enough with these rows that I don't have to do this tape every time. And if you're quilting, you be the judge. And it makes a difference too how many piecing lines, visual lines there are in your quilt. There are quite a few in this one, so I feel like you could dispense with the tape and just use those visual cues. But as I said earlier, the blue tape is so obvious you can see it out of the corner of your eye. It can be really helpful. This quilt actually is quite a busy print, so it is helpful to have that sharp blue distinctive line to guide me. Each row of chandeliers is a generous 1.5 inches below the row of chandeliers above it. Like the bottoms of one row compared to the bottoms of the next, for those of you who are just wondering a bit about spacing. It's best if your tape is long enough to extend out well past your quilt to the batting or even to the backing, or it won't stick. I just know that from doing it. It doesn't stick well to just the quilt top. At least not after it's been stuck and unstuck a few times. It sure doesn't. This is a quilting design that evolved a little bit for me, as many do. When I first started doing it, I made the 3 loops about the same size and height. And gradually I realized that I liked the look of it better. If that center loop is taller, it fills up the chandelier a little more and doesn't leave kind of an open, unquilted bit in the middle. And I like the look of that better. That's the sort of thing that you can play with when you're quilting freehand. And especially if you're quilting a design and it's not quite pleasing, try to analyze what it is about it that's not quite pleasing and see if you can't change that up a little bit. Lots of my freehand designs have changed and evolved over time, and probably will continue to as ideas strike me and I learn things, and yeah. Okay, I'm getting in the groove. So while I quilt, I am going to chat with you just a smidge about our upcoming cruise. Dave and I are hosting a cruise in January of 2025 in the Caribbean. Living in North America, January seems like just an awesome time to go away to the Caribbean. And it is all things machine quilting. So we have a couple of guest teachers that are coming. One is Sam Alberts of Quilting Curve Studio. One is Beth Ann Nemish of White Arbor Quilting. And the 3 of us have very different styles of quilting. So I feel like those who come are going to get a very rich and varied set of classes. But at the same time, we're working quite hard to make them related so that you can take what you learn in one and use it in another or apply it to the same quilt. We just want it to be so useful and so inspiring to all of you. So Sam is quite... she does a lot of custom quilting and quite contemporary in style, a lot of line work, quite a bit of ruler work, and just some very original quilting motifs that I don't see other quilters doing. I love her style. Beth Ann is an artist, and she just has chosen fabric and thread as her medium, sometimes yarn, and so you really see her gorgeous, gorgeous artistry coming through her quilting. She does some very intricate stuff and also you know, things you just don't see elsewhere. Super, super creative, and she's a fabulous teacher too. So there'll be lots and lots of fun and value there. So I know Dave will put a link in the chat, but SBS Experiences just has an X in there, is where you can find the website. But follow his link. That's the easy way. Find out lots of information about that. So if you are enjoying this episode, I would love if you would give it a big old thumbs up. Helps more quilters to find it. YouTube, as always, is free to watch. But if you are interested in supporting the show, you can do that very easily by going to buymeacoffee.com/stitched by Susan. There you can make a contribution as little as $5, or you can choose a monthly option if you wish. We take all of that coffee money, coffee and cream money, and we put it towards always bettering and improving our equipment levels. So we appreciate those of you who support so generously. And at the very end of the show, we have a little rolling credit of those who are regular supporting members. We appreciate you so much. Probably 2 more rows before we have to take a pause and advance the quilt. So a great time to be thinking of your questions or even comments. If you have comments on what I'm doing, I'd love to hear them. This is intended to be interactive. So bring them on. I'm curious, if you take a moment to listen to the sound of the machine, can you hear that I'm trying to keep the pace of it, the speed of it, fairly even throughout? So listen for a second and I'll swoop into those L's and E's, and this is what we hear more commonly. Right? You hear that racing sound and then slowing down for corners and then racing sound. For one thing, it's difficult to get even stitches when you do that. But for another, when you practice this more even pace, it is really good for building control of your machine, because you're not relying on the swing of it to take the curves. You're always in charge, every stitch. It's another great thing that you can practice that will stand you in good stead no matter what you're quilting. I think we can get another row in. I've been quilting all week with a ruler plate on, so I'm feeling just a touch like I'm near the front edge, although I'm really not. I am going to show you guys something though, because this is a reality show. Here we go. Let's break the thread. I'm going to take the camera over here. This is something that happens every so often when I'm quilting, and I'm glad I saw it today before I got to it. Can we see this area on camera, Dave? We're just changing cameras here so I can show you this, right where my finger is. We're just making some adjustments here, you guys. Bear with us. But I can't see it. Yeah, pretty good. Okay. So right here, what has happened is this fabric here is just not quite caught in the seam allowance there. There is a little excess fabric, so a little space. Let me show you what I'm going to do with that. I don't want to just quilt over it, because there will be a raw edge there and it will be a weak spot in the quilt. So I'm taking a pin and tucking, well, I'm going to try to. I'm going to tuck that raw edge under and kind of crease it with my fingernails. There's not really enough there to pin, and pins honestly create sort of buckles in the quilting, but watch my blue painter's tape, you guys. You won't believe this. I'm going to take a piece of blue painter's tape. I'm pulling that fabric over a bit, so there's a bit of overage, if you will. I'm going to painter's tape it in place. I've got to get that fold, and I'm sorry this is so awkward because I'm trying to make room for you to see as well. Hold the fold in place, get the tape on there, tape it in place. Now I'm going to quilt right over the tape. Stick. I'm going to quilt right over the tape, and then I'm going to peel the tape off. And then I'm going to mark it. I probably won't do it on camera because I don't have it handy, but I'll put a safety pin there and a little piece of selvage I'll tie on it so that Jacqueline, who the quilt belongs to, can see it, and then she can go back and reinforce that with a needle and thread. But having given her enough fabric and a bit of a fold enables her to do that well, instead of just stitching down that raw edge. Boy, that tape just does not want to stick, but it will as soon as I stitch it, won't it? Okay, so let's get back over to the side. We're just going to quilt right over top of it as though it wasn't there. And then I'll tear the tape off and show you that process. And I just broke a top thread or ran out of bobbin thread. I'm not sure which. Top thread is not broken, but something went wrong. Okay, so reality show, folks. Let's see what went wrong. So first off, I'm going to rethread. Oh, my needle is threaded, so that seems good. Let's see if we can pull up a bobbin thread. See if it's still down there. Nope. Check again. Nope. Okay. What I'm going to do, though, this last little bit I can see has poor tension on it. So I'm going to undo back to, the last loop and where I'm doing some overlapping so that my join is not going to show or show very, very little. I definitely want to undo this last inch or two because I can see that there's poor tension on that top thread. We don't want to leave that in place. I am not going to worry about knotting the thread or burying the tails. I'm just going to overlap my stitching and do some lock stitching in place. And I'm going to choose to do it right over this seam allowance. I do that because, number one, it's nice and printy there and it won't be very visible, but also doing it over a seam allowance because there's all those fabric thicknesses, also I feel like reinforces that lock stitching and makes it just that little bit even more secure. Let's find all the loose thready tails. I'm going to drop my seam ripper right there so I can find it, and I'm going off to the side to check out my bobbin, try and determine what went wrong. I don't think I'm out of bobbin thread. I am out of bobbin thread. I only had a half bobbin on there. Well, there you go. That's an easy fix. Now you know what that looks like. So I already had a bobbin loading, so I'll go ahead and prep that. I've been getting good, you guys, about actually using my gauge and checking out the bobbin tension before I load it with most bobbins. And sure enough, it's quite low on this one. So I'm out of camera. If you want to change cameras, hon, you can. I'm just tightening the tension on my bobbin case, just a little touch. Let's come down to this end so you guys can see. I've got a, whoa, threads. Hang on one sec. One sec. I'll move Stella a bit. I've got what is like a TOA gauge. I just have a Bernina one. And I just pop my bobbin in it, run it around the pulley system. And I know that this brand of thread should be at about 210 or 220. It's perfect now that I've done a little adjustment. Put the gauge and the screwdriver away. And I keep them right handy beside my machine for obvious reasons. You're never going to use it if it's not handy. Okay, Mr. Producer is telling me there's some comments I need to read, so let me get the bobbin in for half a second here. Might as well take a sip of coffee while we're paused, too, am I right?
I think I should be allowed to speak into these.
Okay. Can we be on the front camera for a jiffy?
Yeah.
Okay, what's happening here? Apparently they're funny. I'm hearing a lot of snickering going on. Elaine, I'm impressed, all the seam ripping and no cussing. You know what? You get so accustomed to seam ripping. Fascinating how you're able to fix problems and don't get in a snit. You know, again, same answer. Like, the reality is some of these things have happened to me so many times. There's just no point in getting frustrated. You just work your way down through this kind of mental checklist. Is it the bobbin thread? Is it the top thread? Is it the tension? And this time it was easy, right? I was just run out of bobbin thread, so super easy fix.
Is it always this way? Because the other day you were in a Smith.
And I do still get frustrated too, you guys. Sometimes it happens. You'll have a problem and you just try and can't seem to fix it. But today it was an easy fix. So remember where I dropped the seam ripper? I'll show you. Are we on a close-up? I don't know if you can see on the print, but right here is where I ended. So that's where I snipped my thread. I'm going to start back about 3 inches before, a good 1/4 inch before. Pull up my bobbin thread right on that stitching line. And my bobbin is pulling too hard. Something's not right still. By the way, you guys, side note, I posted a YouTube video this week, and it's the beginning of a series. This particular one was about the top thread and knowing the feel and sound of it, but there's one coming about bobbin thread, and it talks about exactly this. If you pull on that bobbin thread and it doesn't feel right, stop. Stop before you have to engage the seam ripper and figure out what it is. If something's not right, I'm just going to take one stitch here and see if it feels and sounds right. And it does. Do I know what it was? No, I don't. But something wasn't quite right. Way easier to stop and address it than start stitching and run into thread breaks and issues and fraying and all the stuff. So I just took my 4 or 5 quick lock stitches right over top of that earlier stitching line. That holds that previous line in place. It anchors my new stitching line, and I'm up and away, and I'll come back and clip the tails a little later. Put all my tools away. Ready, set, deep breath, try and keep a smooth curve here. Here we go. Pausing for just a second because that painter's tape is still wanting to lift, but now we're right there, so stick, stick, stick. I don't want to put a pin in because I don't want to zoom over a pin. Okay, we're just going to have to hold that puppy down. I'll come back and show you it afterwards. So I've just stitched right over it. It's right in place. No interruption to stitching at all. And we'll go back and peel the tape off in a moment. Okay, we're over in the basting area. I'm going to go ahead and break thread over here because we're ready to do our first advance. And I talked to you a little earlier about the red snapper, and so we're going to make that adjustment as we go. But first, let's look at the blue tape. Okay, can we all see that? Yes, we can.
Hold on, I'm gonna get the overhead.
We're going to, there we go. Now you can see it. All you do is peel the blue, oh, see what I just did? See, this is a reality show. Let me get my pin. I absolutely should have known that. That was my own fault. I haven't actually quilted the part at issue. So we've just got to put it back in place. I totally should have known that. Mr. Producer said he was going to ask me. He was too slow in asking the questions. Okay, we'll just stick it back down. It's going to come up in the next row. But now my tape will not go anywhere because it is stitched down. Okay. I'll move Stella out of the way. We can have a big picture view, and let's do a quilt advance and take some questions. Let's do questions first. I need some coffee. Today I have cream in my coffee. It's a special day. It's a coffee and cream sort of day. There's a story behind taking more time to have coffee with cream, but today's probably not the day for it. Maybe it's a podcast episode. I don't know. Barbara, it appears you have switched batting brands. Is there a particular reason? I'm giving this batting brand a new try, Barbara. Sharp of you to notice because I've used Hobbs for a long time. I really like the feel of this one. It's similar, but a little softer. So let's just move that a little because it's focusing on that and not my face. So I'm just giving it a really good try, Barbara, and trying some of their different lineup of different battings. And I'm really liking it so far. And Winline is made in the US, which I quite like too. So maybe others are as well. I just know that about that one. Nancy, love this design. Do you have a link for your favorite thread? I have tried both Glide and Superior, but don't know where to get Isacord. Isacord is the brand, ISACORD. 2 places. I order it right now directly from the company, which is Amann USA, AMANN USA. And I think you can get a wholesale account through them. I don't know if you can order like individual spools through them. In fact, I doubt it. But earlier on, before I had that wholesale account, I got them off eBay. You might even look on Amazon. I found a seller that had no shipping fee and still had a pretty decent price, and I could order as many or as few spools as I wanted, and they came in 2 or 3 days. So to me, that was a win-win. There are lots of stores that stock it. Few of them stock the 5,000 yard cones in very many colors, and there's over 300 colors available. So I found online to be the best resource in terms of having all those colors available to me, and a good price. Wendy, how do you get to Carnegie Hall? Practice, practice, practice. You are right, Wendy. I don't think Carnegie Hall is in my future, but I'm on the YouTube stage. Am I right? Linda, it's a little difficult seeing the quilting motif. Could you just show a sample drawing of it on your plexiglass, please? I don't actually have my plexi handy, Linda, and I know it's difficult to see. So number one, I will post some pictures within the next week or 2 that are taken with the light shining on it such that you can see the quilting a little bit better. But do remember too, this is not so much about teaching you the quilting design as just showing you the big process. I do know this one is tricky to see on, and I'm sorry for that. Another Susan, maybe it's the same one again. Are E2E designs in your beginner class or your master class? I really don't have both, Susan. What I call my freehand primer was the first one that I released, and maybe that's the one you're feeling that you're talking about when you talk about online classes and beginner. It now has been reworked and is module 2 in the master class. So if you want to buy just that primer, I'll give you a coupon for the whole price against the master class in a future date if you wanted to. This design is in the master class, yes. A lot of the designs that I show on my YouTube channel are taught in depth, step by step, on high contrast fabric and thread in that master class. So that's kind of another reason, honestly, that I don't show the whole design in depth. This is not the place where I teach, that master class is. This is just the place where you get to benefit from seeing the big picture and seeing them applied to actual quilts. Okay, Sue, have you tried doing the L's and E's upside down? I just tried, it works. Interesting. I haven't, but that would be a fun experiment, because even on this quilt, the quilt itself does not really have a top and a bottom, right? So you could quilt it either way. How interesting is that? If that's easier for you, great idea to experiment with that. Good for you. June, do you do stretches? I know my neck and shoulder area gets so sore when free motion quilting. I now do only E to E with Quilt Path. Yes, I absolutely do. And you see me quilting for the longest spans of time when I do these live episodes, and you must think I do that typically, but I don't. I do make it a habit to stop and, roll my neck and shoulders, or do stretches, or walk up and down the stairs and get, a glass of water or a fresh cup of coffee just to loosen up. You're right. It's not a good idea to just head down stitch for a couple, 3 hours at a time. Gwenna, what is the brand of batting you're trying? It is Winline, W-I-N-L-I-N-E, Winline. And if I find that I love this, as I think I am doing, in future I will be giving you guys some links to where you can find it and purchase it. It's a lady, one single quilter who owns the company. And so some stores are starting to carry it, and she also ships directly to customers. So, but it's a bit of a process, and we're talking that through to try and make it more readily available to individual quilters. Yeah. Madge, do you mind running through your presets on the Bernina? How many locking stitches and any other customization? I need to rethink mine, so want to learn from you. Sure, I don't mind doing that, Madge. And I'll also mention this little series that I'm starting on YouTube called Know Your Machine. It is featuring the Bernina Q series, so quite a few of the episodes will apply whether it's your domestic machine or a quilting machine, but some of them will be specific to that sort of thing, like the customizations that you can do on your screen, or adjusting how full your bobbin is, or changing your presser feet, those sorts of things that are Bernina specific. Okay, so I'm on 11 stitches per inch is one of my presets right now. I've got my my toggles on my right hand. I've got my upper one, the number 2, my thumb. I've got that set on a 4-stitch lock stitch. And that we can vary. For those of you who aren't Bernina owners, you can make it, I think it's 2 to 6. So you can just set how many lock stitches you want. And then I have my number 1 button being my start and stop. And that you can change too. There's toggle buttons on the left, and you can make those any number of things. Single stitch, lock stitch, start, stop. You can use them to speed up or slow down when you're in constant mode, whatever you tell them to do. But that's what I keep my personal presets at. I'm not sure what else I could tell you. I'm stitching in BSR 2 right now, which is the stitch regulator with a coast on it. So even when, no, sorry, BSR 2 is not the coast. BSR 2 stops when I stop with the needle just fixed in place until I move the machine again. BSR 1 is the coast, where the needle is always moving slowly, and then it stitches, and then it just keeps bobbing when I'm holding still. So those are my stitch regulator choices. Okay, I think that's all the presets. All right. Oh, one more on the pattern before we keep on with our advance. What about posting it in advance? So you're asking about the pattern, Dorothy. It won't be in advance, Dorothy, because it is in the master class. So I don't repeat any of those designs in both places, because a lot of people are in both of them, and I don't want them to feel like they're paying for something that they already had. Do you know what I mean? So the master class has, I believe, 31 different designs in it, and the advanced monthly membership has different designs in it. So, okay. I haven't talked about my membership, and I don't intend for these episodes to necessarily be a sales pitch, but in case some of you are wondering, I do have a monthly subscription-based membership. So when you pay each month, you have access to all the things that are in it, and I add to it each month. Okay, here's the thing on the machine. I'm moving, you can see my red snappers up here, and you can see where the wide bit ends right there. I'm moving my machine beyond it, because beyond it there's a very slim rod in the hem, and now it will be able to slide under that dead bar fairly easily. So that is the concession I made to using this system on my Bernina, the red snapper system. I love it so much that I fiddled with it until I got it working smoothly. So I run along and tug. I'm tugging both batting and quilt to make sure that they're pulled down smoothly, and I'm doing a fairly brisk, a fairly firm smoothing down of that fabric on the top. You can either baste next or put your magnetic bars up next, doesn't matter. I do baste before I put the side clamps on again. I like that side tension to be on all layers equally. So I go ahead and baste them first. When I have a big quilt, I usually tug the edges of the backing as well. On a little quilt like this, it is seldom an issue, just to make sure there's no rumpling going on under there. And I have a basting stitch at the push of a button, but if you don't, you can baste just with your regular quilting stitch as well. Go ahead and put my magnets on while I'm walking past. Come on, Stella, we're at this end now. And that little lock stitch, I don't know if you noticed, but I move my machine just a little while it's doing those 4 stitches in succession. That, in my opinion, is what locks them. If you put them all in exactly the same needle hole, they're not really locked. You're just twisting your threads around each other. Okay, we're good to go. Let's move our blue tape. And we'll dive back into quilting. This time we're going to catch that funny seam. I promise. Let's start from the left just for cuz. As you can see, it doesn't really matter which direction I'm moving in. Can we still see the tape a little bit? So I have noticed something, which basically is my quilting handily avoided that spot altogether.
Yeah, we went past it. Now
Okay, you guys will see it when I come back around. It's going to be the next row still before I actually make loops that cover that seam portion that was not caught. So no worries, it's not hurting anything to leave the blue painter's tape there. I think someday I should write a book entitled "1,000,001 Ways a Quilter Can Use Blue Painter's Tape." But seriously, this is one of the best ones. Like, how else are you going to hold that in place? If you tried to pin that little teeny tiny fold of fabric in place, you'd never get it to stitch down smoothly, I don't think. But with the blue tape over it, piece of cake. Piece of cake. What happened there? Okay, funny story. Speaking of reality shows, are we on a close-up? Yep. So I am going to break thread here. So what happened was one of my thread tails from earlier was caught under the clamp at the side, and a loop of it caught my current stitching thread and just acted like a bungee cord and just yanked me back. So I've got this funny little, whoops. You didn't want to see all those threads, did you? No. Out of my thread cup. What I ended up was this funny little moon-shaped bit of stitches. So we're just going to undo those quickly and then start afresh. For a minute there, I thought, what in the world? But how convenient that it's close to the edge and relatively easy to fix. Make sure I get all those stitches out of there. And the bit that's over in the basting line, I won't even worry about that. There's no need to undo that. And by the way, the foot I have on here is a ruler foot. It's the 72S, which has the little slit in it, and you're seeing me pop my thread in and out of that, which some people don't love just because your thread can come out when you move it like that. But I love it because it's so easy to put my thread in. So it's worth it to me as my favorite foot. Quite honestly. Okay, we're back in business. Coming up on our blue tape. Maybe third time's the charm, you guys. Okay, knowing right where that problem is, I am making sure to stitch right over it, even though it made a very wide L in there. I think that's desirable. So it is now stitched down securely. It's not going anywhere. When I get to an end of this row, we'll come back and have a look at it. See how I did. Okay, let's go look at our painter's tape. Here it is. And my little seam that was coming undone is right under here. And so I made that L go right over it. So now my painter's tape will peel right off. And it's going to be a bit of a process, and I won't do it all on camera. But it's kind of like foundation paper piecing. It just splits where those stitches were, right? So I'm just going to take my seam ripper and go in there and grab all the bits and pull them out one at a time till they're out. And it will take a minute or two, but it's not awful by any means. And then, as I said, I will just grab me a safety pin, tuck it in there, and I'll get a piece of selvage and just knot it around that pin. So there's a nice little flag there, and then Jacqueline will know to come back and stitch this. You can see it, there's still an opening there, but it is semi-secured now with my stitching, and she can go back and put a few hand stitches in there, and it'll be golden. Some time back I did a log cabin quilt for a friend, and it was a vintage quilt that had been tied with buttons put every so often. And so she took that apart and put fresh batting in it and wanted it quilted just for a cabin quilt. And it wasn't in great shape, and she didn't want to necessarily mend it or replace fabrics. And some of those buttons had actually created holes. So I did blue painter's tape all over that quilt on all of those holes and just did quite a bit of quilting, and basically it's held together by quilting now. But again, that painter's tape was just so invaluable in enabling me to just quilt smoothly over all those bits, and none of them caught in my hopper foot as I was going over them. It was awesome. I think that was probably the first quilt I tried it out on, and I was totally sold. Every so often my chandelier shapes are questionable. The chandelier's a little off kilter, but you know what? In the scheme of things, so many chandeliers in one quilt, I don't think it's an issue. I'm just going to keep persevering, and I do kind of take a big picture look at it from time to time as I'm doing the rows and think, now do I need to adjust them? Are they running all to the right, or am I getting some larger spaces and some smaller ones, that sort of thing. And then I just adjust them a little bit the next time through. And it all looks good in the end. this number. And as good point as any to talk about this. I've watched so many quilters have chunky seam allowances and they quilt around them in order to avoid the awkwardness of trying to create smooth stitching over it. I take the opposite approach. I purposely try to stitch that thing down. Your quilt, when it's all finished, will look far better. If I stitch around that, that is going to stick up like a button forever. And it's an easy fix. Stitch over it, stitch it down. That's my method for thick seam allowances. Anchor them. Just going to go really slowly here and kind of hold that in place. Can I do it with one hand? I don't know if I can make a smooth loop one-handed. We got it. We got it. Just looking back. Yeah, my loops are definitely shallower at this end. So my next row or two, I'm going to pay a little more attention to that. My blue painter's tape line, I've been clearly talking a little too much. And my lines are going a little downhill toward the right. Not a ton, but maybe as much as half an inch. So over the next 2 or 3 rows, I'll just try and shift that line a little bit. Make the droops a little further on the left here, a little shallower on the right. It'll all come out in the wash. There's another thick seam allowance, and I'm just deliberately stitching right over it so it will lay nice and flat in the finished quilt. Beautiful. Again, if you're finding this helpful / enjoyable, please, thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and hit that bell if you want notifications of when I'm live again, or in fact when new episodes are released. I do endeavor to send out a newsletter, usually 2 days before these live episodes, with a photograph of what project I'll be working on and some idea of the topics that I'll be covering. And we try and do these live and unscripted episodes twice a month. Now in February, I'm traveling on a couple of weekends, so there is a possibility I'll be doing this again right away next Friday, because the one after that I will definitely be traveling. If any of you are going to be at the Sew Expo show in Puyallup, Washington, that's where I'll be. Come by and say hi at the Bernina booth. That is the first few days of March in 2024. It's a great show. And I'll just put in a little plug. There is a scone shop that comes there every show that I've ever been at. And oh my goodness, their scones, they just break them in half and they fill them with a little butter and a bunch of fresh raspberry jam. They are ridiculous. Let me give you a rundown again of the equipment and tools that I'm using today. So I'm sewing on a Bernina Q24. The 24 just means I've got the machine model that has 24 inches from the needle to the back of the machine. Q series long arm. I've got it loaded with Isocord 100% poly thread in a 40 weight and an eggshell color 0101 for those of you that use the brand. I have the same thread, top and bobbin, and I've got a 9014 universal needle loaded. Bernina long arms use regular sewing machine needles, so it's exactly the same needles as I keep on hand for my sewing machines. What else? I've got the ruler foot on. I certainly wouldn't have to have. I could be using a darning foot, but this is what I've been using all week, and it's a good all-purpose foot. The 72S is what I'm using. And I'm stitching in stitch regulated mode today, which just means that I've got the stitches per inch set at 11, and the machine, you can hear a little bit. The engine is, the motor is revving up and slowing down, always adjusting as I'm stitching to maintain that even stitch length. And the little tiny red lights that you're seeing near my needle, that's the two cameras that regulate those stitches. So they're both watching the movement of the fabric and always adjusting to give me beautiful stitches. I've got Shabby Chic is the fabric pattern and kit designer, and so that's what I have loaded as a backing. And I've got Winline 80% cotton, 20% poly batting loaded. Just a very good all-purpose, very washable, very durable, very soft batting. So after this row, I'll stop again for a fresh sip of the beverage, and some questions and comments. So now's your chance. If it is in fact a question, remember to put a QQ in front of it so that we're able to pull them up by searching. I see that I'm further from the blue tape again. Clearly my tendency is to go shorter on the left. I have to keep being conscious of that. And there we are at the edge. And this time, because I don't have my red snapper thicker part to deal with, I don't even have to break thread. So I just stopped with needle down. I'm just going to pull the machine up with me as I advance. Last chance to get in a couple of questions as I roll the machine up, and then we'll stop and chat for a few minutes. Thumbs up if you're enjoying this. I think that's about it. If I can go a little bit further, I've just got, oh yeah, lots of room there. I've just got 2 more passes then. So once again, as I do with every pass, I see what the problem is. My one side clamp was on. I could feel some resistance and didn't know what it was and should have stopped to look. As I do with every pass, I give a tug to the quilt and the batting. The quilts and the batting. Firm down, smooth down that quilt really firmly over the top. So I know there's no excess fabric in here. Grab a couple stray threads, pull them out of there. Okay, I'm going to show you one more thing before we go to questions. Can I see this on camera, Mr. Producer? You're seeing from that side. Is it easy? I'm not sure which one is easier to show. We'll go here, I guess. So one of the questions that was asked earlier was about whether it's okay to have the batting cut the size of the quilt or close to it, and it does not extend as far as the backing does. Here's why you would want your batting fuller, or what difference it makes. As you're rolling up a quilt, this part is plump and full because it's got batting in it. The batting stops right there, and this is starting to sag a little bit. With a bigger quilt, you'd see it much more. You'll start to get some sag in this excess fabric here. But you don't always have more batting or want to waste more batting. So here's an easy fix for it. Grab the very last layer on your roll-up of the fabric. It's not loose enough to even show you. Grab it and pull it snug. See how this just pulls up nice and snug? Run your finger around and just tuck it right under your tight roll, and that holds it in place. It makes the whole quilt stop sagging. It makes it much easier to attach your side clamp when you don't have this woo-woo of fabric going on. And in all ways, it's better, but that's a great way to deal with it. If you can't get it to hold under there, I've sometimes pulled it and actually stuck a pin right through the leader or through the layers to hold that in place. You've just got to remember to take the pin out when you go to unroll it then, because of course it will catch. But that's another way to just keep that pulled taut, and it keeps your quilt much flatter. Okay, let's talk. Let me get my cafe. All right. Susan, how big are the HSTs on her quilt? So by the HSTs, you would mean these. They're 4 inches. Yeah, they're 4 inches. You could always travel to the Sewing Expo in Atlanta in March. You know, I could, and if Bernina asked me to, I would. But I don't see it on the docket this year, so we'll see. How long are the loops average? Well, my chandelier, each row is dropping about 1.5 inches from the row that was before. So the loops themselves are 1.25 inches and 2, something like that, ish. Cindy Lou, I just got my Bernina long arm a few weeks ago. I love the stitch regulator, wondering in what circumstance you wouldn't use it. Great question, Cindy. I actually enjoy stitching without the stitch regulator. If I'm doing a design, maybe something that's floral or like edge to edge all over feathers, that's fairly consistent in speed, it does go smoother when you don't have the stitch regulator on. There is some small amount of almost resistance when the machine is always trying to make an adjustment to control that stitch length. So it's kind of a smoother out of your stitching. You can often get smoother curves without that regulator on. And it's a really good tool for learning to stitch in a smooth and even pace, because you really get wonky stitches if you don't. So it's a good tool, and I like the sound too of the motor just running along at an even pace. To me, that's just much more zen, much more peaceful to sit and quilt like that if I've got to quilt for several hours. Catherine, how do you keep the edges from flopping? I think I answered that one, Catherine, just with my demo of pulling it up. Yeah, under the roller. Jean, is the win line heavier than the Hobbs 80/20 you used for a long time? What do you like about it? It's not any heavier. It's a very similar weight. I think, my opinion, I think that it's a little bit softer. It's softer like to the finger feel, and the drape of it is a little bit softer. It's not massive. It's not a big difference, but I do like it. Madge, I missed the beginning. Did you already talk about this beautiful fabric? I'm falling in love. I did briefly. It's by, I've been saying Shabby Chic, but it's Shabby Fabrics. And actually, thanks for reminding me, Madge. I'll go back afterwards and put some proper credit information into the description. So if you come back in an hour or two to the episode, you'll find that in the description so that it can be found. I believe this was a kit. I know the backing anyway came to me. It was packaged up for this quilt. So I think it was a kit, and the backing came with it as part of it. So I'm not sure what line of fabric it is or even what pattern, but Shabby Fabrics is where it's from. All right, we're in business. Back to quilting. Basting stitch, so we're basting down the left here. And you can see, much like I showed along the top when I was basting it, I'm pulling a little bit on the bits that have been stitched already to make what's not yet stitched go under my needle faster. You can either pull it like I'm doing, you can grab it with a thumbnail like this, like any number of ways. You can push it with your finger from the front. You just need to get that fabric under the needle and not let it push out in front. So whatever way works for you. And you can see my backing here is sagging a little bit. It's not very much, so I'm probably not going to take the time to address it. Again, the bigger the quilt, the more that will be cumulative, right? And get worse and worse as you go on down the quilt. So you'll have to, at some point, address it. But it's easy to do. You see I've got just a little bit of fullness here, but I'm just tugging quite firmly with my thumbnail, just pulling that bit by bit by bit under the needle, easing it in under there. And there we go, we're past that full part. And away we go. It's almost magical. If you deal with those little bits as you go and never let it get into a big problem, it's so much easier than if you just push that fabric ahead of you and all of a sudden you've got a pleat and there's just nowhere to go with it. One side clamp. We'll move our tape while we're on this side. Other side clamp. And our magnets. And we're ready to go. So feel free to keep typing in your questions. I'm going to just heads down, try and get this done. So because my chandeliers are tilting just a touch, on that last one I felt myself bump that top rail, so I'm just moving it down about a ½ inch because I do not want to bump it hard and have a flat topped letter, do I? Flat topped L. Thread tail in, come out of there. There we go. So here we're coming up on that little area where I'll move down a smidge, where I eased in some extra fabric, and you can see this little tiny bit of fullness going on here. So a couple ways to deal with that, because I don't want it to form a pleat, right? I don't want to push it ahead of me and get a pleat. So what I'm going to do is stitch with one hand driving and one hand kind of stretching the fabric just a touch over the nose of my long arm. If you're not comfortable stitching with one hand, this is where vegetable cans or even something like your roll of blue painter's tape can help just by putting that little weight on. And if you're in the middle of the quilt, one on each side is ideal, and it just kind of distributes that fullness and allows you to stitch it down, and then when you take your weights off, it's just all kind of eased into place. It's only a very small amount here. It's not a big deal. I just thought it was a good opportunity to talk about that. And in fact, more of it's going to end up coming up in the next row anyways than this row. But that's how I deal with stuff like that. That is just so very common. You're working with fabric and it shifts and it moves a little bit and it flexes a little bit. And so there's just ways to manage it. I'm going to pause for half a second. I realized that I never put on a fresh bobbin to wind, so I'm going to pause and do that because I must be getting very near the end of this one. And I'm just going to step out of camera a little bit because I've got a practically empty spool on my bobbin winder, so I'm going to get a fresh one. And I will use that up, by the way, for those of you that are frugal. There's just no point in winding 1/4 of a bobbin on air. I might even take it to my sewing machine and just use it for a little bit of stitching there, just to use up that thread. So now that bobbin can just be winding while we stitch, and it'll be ready. If I don't run out in this row. We'll see. We'll see how good my guesstimation is. I am going to go ahead and stop here. I'm pretty confident my bobbin must be about out. Just for the sake of ease, since I've already shown you a couple of splices, I'm going to go ahead and change it out and put a fresh one on. Yep, we're nearly there. It's funny how after, you know, many bobbin changes, you just get this sort of sixth sense for, I know about when that's going to run out. Helped by the fact that I typically use the same thread all the time, so I have the same amount on each bobbin. Just checking my tension. I'm trying to be such a diligent girl and check that. I had something tiny happen the other day. I loaded a new bobbin and I realized that it was, you know how it sits on the spring in the bottom and it's got some springiness in that bobbin, and I thought, oh, that's way too springy. It's sitting up way higher than it should. I've learned, check it out. When something looks not quite right, check it out. So I did, and one side of that, the bobbin tension disc that sits underneath the bobbin had popped loose. And so, indeed, the bobbin was being held up far too high. I don't know what would have happened if I had started stitching, but I'm sure it would not have been pretty. So I was glad I stopped and checked that. It's little occurrences like that that kind of were my, one of my reasons for starting this Know Your Machine series. So it's partly about knowing the features of your machine and maybe the personalizations or settings that you can change on it. And it's partly about just getting to know your machine and your thread and the feel of your bobbin and the pull of your thread and all those things. And the more that you get to know your machine, whether it's your sewing machine or your quilting machine, the easier the whole process becomes. Largely because you recognize as soon as something is just a little bit off. And it helps you just to quickly diagnose what that is and fix it and get back in business. Earlier this year, I acquired a Bernina sewing machine, and to me, honestly, that was daunting. Just that prospect of getting to know a new machine, because I had had my previous sewing machine for so many years. And it's like getting to know a new person. There's no shortcut. You've got to get to know it before you become friends and work together well, right? I bet lots of you have experienced that too. Maybe you have some great stories about that. Okay, I think we're done with the painter's tape. We're going to leave it at the top here just in case it doesn't work well, but I'm going to just wing it across based on the seams that I'm seeing, the horizontal seams. Worked quite well. We were talking about how big these loops were a little while ago, and I said 1.25 inches to 2. And that's about right. I think my smaller ones might be a little smaller than that. So 1 inch and 2, thereabouts. Certainly saves time not to have to adjust the blue tape. We can get one more in. And there we are at the edge. Stop with needle down. We are in fact done with the blue painter's tape. We'll wad that all up and throw it at Mr. Producer. Ah, we missed. I keep the magnets, by the way, in a row behind me. I work with my back to the wall, so just in the groove of wall and fatigue mat, they fit nicely in there, and I don't stub my toes on them very often. Whereas if they are out on the floor or elsewhere, you either stub your toe on them, or if they stick together, they're very tricky to get apart. Do you see what I see? We cannot quite do it in one more pass. Here's what we're going to do, though. We're going to go ahead and do the basting all the way around. So let's get ourselves organized, tug everything down. Do we have some questions, Mr. Producer, sir?
Not very many. I have a couple.
Let's take a couple questions and I'll answer them, and then we'll go ahead and finish basting. Gwenna, do you float your tops? Yes, I do. Hence this bottom edge, which is not attached to anything. So I did talk earlier in the episode if you want to know more about that process. Jean, you said the ruler foot is a good general purpose foot. Is there a time when you wouldn't use it? Because it's thick, it's 1/4 inch thick, Jean, it reduces visibility a little bit. So if I'm doing something really fine, then I might go to that darning foot, which is much tinier and much easier to see your quilting area. Linda, what is your favorite piecing thread? Do you ever use your isocord for piecing? I do. And you know, years ago I didn't, because it just seemed like polyester thread was uncommon for piecing. It seems to be more and more common. Poly does not get the bad rap that it used to of almost being so strong that it sawed through the cotton fibers of the fabric. So I know more and more people that use it for piecing. I don't always, probably just because my big cones are not easy on my sewing machine. I typically use a cotton, but if I want a certain color, I have all the colors in quilting thread. So I use it sometimes for piecing, is the short answer. Susan, do you ever have time to quilt for yourself? I do. I don't have tons and tons of time to piece quilts for myself, but I do usually follow them through, quilt them, hang them. This one behind me I made over the last year, the applique and the quilting both. So that was one of my own. Tracy, I'm late to the party. Are your rows overlapping with the stitches? Yes, they absolutely are. One row I'm dropping down the chandeliers. The next row I'm putting the loops in them and dropping the next set of chandeliers. Yes. Okay, that's it, you guys. Well, how are we doing for time? Because my question is, do we want to fully finish this? There's nothing earth-shattering coming anymore. How are we doing, Mr. Producer? Oh, let's turn a basting stitch on. Well, you know what? Why don't you guys chime into the comments? Are those of you, I mean, if you're sitting at home watching and this is enjoyable to just have going, I'll just proceed. We're certainly going to be half an hour yet, maybe even more. Chime in. Shall we get to the finish line? Or have we seen all there is to see today? So I've just advanced it. I'm putting my side clamps on and basting each side as I go. Is this side on camera, Dave? Do we want to put it on camera? There we go. Just because I'm running into a situation where, because of this seam here, it is more difficult to fit it into the little tiny groove of my side clamp. So I've got a pin in my hand and I'm just running that pin through that little channel. That little wee channel is not even 1/8 of an inch. So someone asked earlier, how do you get that in there so easily? Well, you know, practice is part of it, and tricks like this are part of it. It is a tiny channel. It is tricky. And I am certainly struggling with that little seam allowance. It's in. Got it. So a few of you are saying, let's finish, and a couple others are saying, could we have a close-up view of the pattern? So here's what we'll do. Barring any complications, I will go ahead and finish the quilt, and then yes, Mr. Producer will give me a handheld camera and I'll pan over it. I can't do that right now because I've just advanced, right? So you're not seeing the quilted part. So we will have to go ahead and quilt some more in order to do that. I put that side clamp on and that was silly because I actually want to go ahead and advance this a little bit and baste around that bottom edge. Then everything is fixed and in place and we're just ready to go. And I'm just going to step off to one side and have a look across the bottom of my quilt. It looks nice and straight. And if it wasn't, I'd tug it into position a little bit. I might even pin it if I thought there was some real awkward bits in it, but this one looks nice and straight, so I'm just basting across that bottom edge. Again, the little bit of weight of my left hand on what's already been stitched pulls what's coming under the needle under it just a little faster so it doesn't push out in front of that hopper foot and get away from me. Beautiful. Up the last side. Right now I'm stitching really close to the edge. I'm about 1/8 of an inch away. I just try and keep it well within what's going to fall within the seam allowance of the binding so that it never has to be undone. So anything under 1/4 inch works. All right, now we're going to back up just a touchy touch. I think to save fussing with that side clamp again, this time I'm just going to put my single clamps in place, showing you that this is an option. If you can't get those edge clamps on because of a super uneven edge or because of seam allowances, these side clamps that come with the machine, whatever your machine is, work fine too. I'm just going to go ahead and put my trusty yardstick under to lift them up so that my long arm doesn't whack into them when I get over to the side. You have options. These yardsticks were my grandpa's, by the way. They are definitely older than I am, which is getting quite old, honestly. We do have a problem here. The camera is bumping into the clamp. Let's see. We're going to have to just leave that clamp on. Or off, I mean. And, yeah, it's bumping into everything, really. That's the beauty of it. Oh, we still got a basting stitch on. That will never do. Oh, I see what I'm doing. I have managed, by happenstance, to start every row alternately, apparently up till now, because I realize this one's in the middle of a chandelier and usually I start between chandeliers, so I'm just going to run to the other side. because my head is working that way right now. It's really not a right or a wrong way. You could go back and forth between. Just that's the way my head has gotten used to gauging the spacing, so I'm going to stick with what I'm comfortable with today. If you're finding this helpful and enjoyable, do give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and if you click on the notification bell, YouTube will let you know when there's a live happening or when there's a new episode being uploaded. And for these live ones, if you want to know what's up and coming, I try to send out a photograph and some idea of the general topics, usually the Wednesday before, 2 days before. So if you need to sign up for my newsletter, there's a link in the description, or you can just go to my website, stitchedbysusan.com, and you'll get a little pop-up box. I bet you've seen those before, inviting you to sign up for my newsletter. A design like this that is so repetitive is so excellent, honestly, at honing your skills. After you've quilted a few rows of this, it's a little bit mindless in terms of where do I go next. And so then focus your attention on instead forming, really smooth and upright L's and E's, or on, getting the middle one a certain height and the two little ones on either side exactly the same, or focus on the shape of the arc of the chandelier that you're dropping. There's just an opportunity when you're quilting something over and over and over like this, and don't miss the opportunity to really hone your skills of control. You've kind of got two choices. You can either just whack it out mindlessly and not really think about it, and you'll still have a done quilt at the end, or you can really put some intentionality and some thought into, hey, this is an opportunity to get in some real practice. And what it does is eliminates much of the need for actual practice pieces, because you're practicing while you're quilting. I was thinking the other day of the word practice. It's actually my word of the year for 2024, but I was kind of trying to think of it used in different applications with just slightly different connotations. And of course, one of them is a lawyer's practice or a doctor's practice. And you don't think of that, hopefully, as someone practicing a skill they don't really know and trying to figure it out. but somehow it still is called, in the English language, a practice. So of course from that I went to thinking, well, hey, that's what we quilters should call our businesses, right? I don't have a quilting business, I have a quilting practice. I mean, how fitting is that? Another thing you can focus on when it's getting kind of mindless, and this is something I have to keep telling myself, is focus on my own posture. I tend really badly actually to hone in, to lean right in on my quilting and get my nose practically in it. And I have to keep telling myself, stand up and relax. It's not that I can't see it. It's not that I don't know where I'm going. It's just habitual with me. So it's just something else you can think about. I've got the quilting down. I don't have to put a ton of thought into that anymore, Just think about instead how I'm standing, how I'm holding my head. Are my hands relaxed on the hand grips? Are my shoulders down? Take a second to advance it so we can see the end. Those of you who do both computerized and free motion quilting, can you see why, and do you agree, why I love doing this type of work freehand, because I think it's such a time savings to not have to fiddle with advances and repeats and lining up and even establishing the quilt size and the safe zone and all those things beforehand. And for those of you who are considering digital versus free motion, you know, take this as your sort of introduction, your opportunity to see this at work and see how really quick it can be, especially when I'm not talking tons and tons, how really quick it is to cover ground on a quilt like this. I do have a digital system too, and this year I've been learning how to use it and get more comfortable with it. And there certainly are times when I love it. It's very, very nice to get it all set up and, you know, everything in place and working smoothly, and then to be able to trot off and, you know, answer emails or cut out the next project while it's sewing. That is lovely, don't get me wrong. But in terms of actual start to finish time for quilting something, in my opinion, it is hands down faster to do it freehand than it is to do it on the computer. So where earlier I was using that blue painter's tape for my visual guide, now I'm very much using the seam lines. So in this row across, I made that last one a little short, but basically I'm using this seam line and I'm dropping my chandeliers to that seam line. The next one I won't have a seam line, but it might be this point here, or it might be just gauging, oh, I'm half an inch above that point, right? So you use your own comfort level in your quilt. If you still want to use the blue painter's tape, by all means go for it. But if you've got a quilt that's got enough vertical seams, it can be enough, just enough. And the border is slim enough that I'm able to just, by guess and by gosh, it over here in the border and still end up just fine. The key just is to determine in this first square or two where that mental marker is, and then to aim for it with each dropped chandelier. And we just ran out of bobbin thread. Just like that. I was thinking to myself, will I make it to the end? No. So, again, as I did earlier, knowing that the last couple of inches won't have good tension on that bobbin thread, right? I'm going to undo at least 2 inches. Beyond that, I'm going to go to a place where I think I can hide it the best and where I think it's going to cross a seam allowance because I think that will anchor it the best. You can't always make all of those things happen, but that's the goal. Sometimes you just can't find a seam allowance that's nearby or convenient or a good hiding print or whatever. But in this case, I can. I'm actually going to make it right here. So I'm going to leave a couple stitches there, trim my 2 threads. They're not knotted. I'm not going to take the time to knot them. I'm just cutting them off, and I'm going to start overlapping them a little bit and stitching over this seam allowance, putting my lock stitches in there. It's going to be nice and secure. Drop my blue seam ripper so I don't forget where I was, and tootle off to the side. Now, I did not set another bobbin winding, but I'm pretty sure I have a partial white bobbin on the go. I don't think I have one that's got enough. So actually, you guys, we're going to wind a bobbin and take some questions. Hang on here, my bobbin winder is just a little tangled. What is going on? I don't know, but we're going to fix it. I got a strand wrapped around the bottom of the spool holder, and I cannot seem to get it off. I will come back later and actually unscrew that because it's tucked in there firmly. Okay, let's start afresh. Some of you with super sharp eyes will notice that I went around the first knob twice. I have learned that that helps with my semi-slick polyester thread. So instead of just going around it the once, I actually go around it twice. If I only do it once, it pops out pretty much every bobbin. So I realize that's just not enough to hold it in there. Okay, do we want to take a few questions / comments? I'll get a sip of my lovely elixir in. So good. Marie Suzanne, is 11 stitches your go-to, and why might you change it? You know, anywhere from 10 to 12 is kind of my go-to, but 11 is the favorite. Why might I change it? If I'm doing something that's on a very small scale, so maybe I'm putting pebbles into something, or just something that's very, very tiny. The other day I was quilting little half square triangles, and I was tucking a tiny flower into each one. When those petals are so small, 11 stitches per inch makes kind of angles around the petals, right? And so I will sometimes go as high as 14 or 15 when I'm doing something that's that fine. It just makes a smoother stitch. When I'm doing an edge to edge, I don't want that many stitches because I have to slow down my movements so much to fit that many stitches in per inch and cover, you know, so many inches per hour, if that makes sense. So 10, 11, 12 seems to be a good rule of thumb for doing edge to edge like this. And it has a pleasing look. I know some quilters prefer longer stitches. They feel like that looks more like hand stitching. But those are some of the reasons you might want to change, either larger or smaller. Doreen, do you leave your ruler plate on, or do you use only with rulers? I typically use it only with rulers. Number one, because I don't do tons and tons of ruler work, like a small percentage of my time is spent doing that. But chiefly because when the ruler plate is on, it reduces how far forward I can pull my machine toward me by several inches, right? I'm literally losing throat space. I don't want to lose that, so I take the ruler plate off. But it's not, if that's not the issue for you, you can leave it on. It doesn't hurt anything. Any more? Mr. Producer was napping. Sue, the quilt behind you, did you use channel lock and quilt across? It's beautiful. I did use channel lock, and I did quilt it all in straight lines. And I did it with a kind of wasabi colored thread. It's not as bright green as the one you're seeing here. A little more olivey, but oh my word, it looks good on all those gorgeous, gorgeous colors. I love it. Laura, Earlier, you defined the difference between custom and free motion. So I defined custom and edge to edge, by the way. Does that mean that all free motion patterns run the same cost when we quilt by checkbook? So I assume you do mean edge to edge. And the short answer is no. The longer answer is most of mine do, because it just makes quilting for people easier when I say my rate is. But in order to do that, I make them approximately the same scale and density. The reason that it might change is if someone does an edge to edge, and imagine they're doing a paisley that's this big, 8 inches, big sweeping paisleys on your quilt. Imagine how quick that goes and how little thread that takes, compared to doing a 2 or 3 inch paisley with only half an inch between the lines all over the whole quilt. That difference is huge in terms of time and thread. And so you will get quilters who go from perhaps 1.5 pennies or 1 3/4 pennies an inch all the way up to, I don't know, 3 for edge to edge. I've definitely seen 3 per inch. So that's why it would vary, is just how much density and how much thread. And different quilters will handle that differently. For me, the thread, I go by how many bobbins it takes, because that's accurate. That gives you a good gauge. So that's why it might vary. Cindy Lou, I was taught to pin my backing to the leaders, but I got the idea to just baste instead. It's worked beautifully. I'm wondering why that's not a method that's taught. Am I missing something? I don't think you're missing anything at all. I know quilters who do that. They swear by that, just basting that quilt onto their leaders. Now, it means, number one, that you've got leaders that zip off, and not everybody has those, so that might be one thing. Or maybe you baste them on the frame while it's right on there. Can you keep it straight? Like, if you can manage that, good for you. Another method that I've seen is using the cover stitch on a serger. If you've got leaders that you can zip off, that cover stitch, that's not the word I want. Chain stitch is the word I want. It's like what you used to see on flour sacks or dog food bags, where you pull one thread and the whole thing comes out. You can do that on a lot of sergers, and I've seen quilters load quilts that way. So whatever's working for you and producing a good result in a timely fashion, good for you. Carol, is the other quilt the same pattern? Yes, and it's the same fabrics as well. It's a twin. It looks identical. Do you know, I haven't actually unfolded fully the whole thing, but I'm pretty sure it's the same pink and blue. Jean, as a new free motion quilter, mine's not faster than digital, but I'm loving the challenge, and your patterns go so far beyond meandering. Thank you. Well, thank you for that compliment, Jean. I appreciate it. Yes. I mean, to me, meandering is not the easiest of designs. So if you can meander, you definitely can do many other things. It's just a matter of learning them, learning the quilting path. And it will get faster, Jean. I promise you it will. The time savings comes in. You go at a higher speed, honestly, than the computer drives a machine usually. And then the time saving comes in that whole setup process. You know, establishing the save zone, establishing the repeats, when you advance, matching up those repeats, all that stuff you just do in your head as you go when you're doing it entirely free motion. Victoria, do you ever get your threads split when sewing right to left? I quilt with glide 40 weight and it starts splitting after about 12 inches sewing right to left in a straight line. Yes, it's so common among quilters. I am very fortunate. My machine handles it pretty well. It's the very odd time that happens to me. On some long arms, you can mess with things like turning the needle a tiny fraction in machines where the needle turns, right? Mine it doesn't, because mine loads just like a sewing machine. It's got a flat back, one way to do it, and it's perfect. And I love that. But sometimes you can mess with that a little bit. Sometimes most cones will unwind in a spiral fashion, but you can buy spools of thread, right, that unwind, they lay on their sides and you just pull them. That can make a difference, right? Because it has to do with the twisting or untwisting that's making it split and shred. So fiddle around with some of those things and see if that might make a difference for you. Emily, I've used your feathers all over on several quilts and they're getting to look more and more like yours. Great feeling. Awesome. I'm so happy for you, Emily. And I'll just mention, under all my YouTube episodes in the description, I post a link for my free All Over Feathers class. It's a great introduction to laying a design over top of a whole quilt top. And it's not a beginner level look, but I do think even beginners can figure it out. And I just walk you through it step by step and teach that whole thing. Lauren, will you show the last row, please, either now or later? Hard to visualize the bottom to be continuous. You bet I will. I'm going to go ahead and quilt all the way to the bottom once, we're done these comments. Marion, you mentioned putting pictures of the finished quilt on Facebook. Can you also drop a picture in your next email for those of us who are not on Facebook? I'll try to remember, Marion. It's just on my head to remember to do that is all. I will try really hard. Yes. And there's usually a after the quilt is finished and I take photos, I make a new thumbnail for the YouTube episode. I don't know if you're watching on YouTube or Facebook, some of you, but that thumbnail always has a portion at least of the finished quilt, and I try and catch it in good lighting too so that you can get an idea of what the quilting design is that's being featured. I know this quilt particularly, it's really difficult to see. Emily, this show has taught me so much. Thank you, Susan. I started with a digital and found it difficult to line up consistently row to row. And it is possible, and there's tricks for that too, right? But that is a different skill set, and it can be difficult, and some patterns are easier than others. So I do still love free motion quilting. For all those reasons and more besides. Okay, bobbin is wound. Let's get it on and finish this puppy up. Have you noticed I remembered to check my bobbin tension every single time today? Onto my gauge, run it around the clips. Woo, perfect. So not only am I checking actual tension with that because I have a digital gauge, but I'm checking that it flows smoothly, that my gauge doesn't wobble, right? All those are indicators of a well-wound bobbin, which helps give you beautiful tension. Gosh, it's difficult to get under the machine with all this camera apparatus. Let's see here. And usually, you guys, I would put a drop of oil in, if not every bobbin, then every second bobbin. And I have not stopped to do that today, but it is a small quilt, so I'm thinking we're okay. I forgot to drop my seam ripper. I usually drop that so diligently. There it is, at my join. Well, if I dropped it, Mr. Producer, sir, I moved it, because it's not there anymore. Okay, so I'm overlapping my previous stitching by about 1/4 inch, taking a few lock stitches in place, and I'll leave my tails and come back and cut them a little later. Where are we? We're at loop number 2. Here we go. Got a little fullness going on here, so again, I'm just dropping my hand on it and varying the weight. Sometimes it's light, sometimes it's a little more weight to sort of stretch the fabric out, distribute that fullness, and then stitch it down, hopefully pleat free. So far today, successfully. So Lauren asked a great question about the bottom of the quilt. I'm going to try and gauge so that I've got chandeliers dropping right at the bottom. I don't know if it's going to happen or not. I don't think I can do it yet from this row, but maybe from the next one I'll start kind of measuring and saying, shall I put in 3 more rows or shall I put in 4 more rows? It's definitely looks better if you do it, if you've got to make any fudges or adjustments, if you do it across several repeats as opposed to making one row super skinny or super big. And some designs you can just make them appear to cut off wherever the end of the quilt is. But with this one, I'm going to try and make my chandeliers end up at the bottom. And you know, here's where I wish I had saved my blue painter's tape. But seeing as it's not terribly expensive, I'm just going to get me another one. Because this whole border across the bottom does not have seam lines, right? So now I'm looking at, we can see the big picture, yes. I'm looking at the space that's left and I'm saying, you know, that'll work out just about perfectly to put 3 more rows in there. So I'm going to go ahead and drop a piece of tape on so that I know where I'm heading. For row 1, row 2, and then the bottom edge will be the 3rd row. I mean, why not take the worry out of it? Oh, cut my tape a little short. Hopefully it'll stick long enough to get these 3 done. Gotta move this one down a little bit. It's just too skimpy. Too skimpy. Try that on for size. And it is definitely true that if I've got to make them a little shorter, it's better to make 3 rows all a little bit shorter than to make 1 row half-sized. That will catch your eye. I definitely had that one loop on the far left is hanging much lower. It's either a broken chandelier or low-hanging fruit or something. Okay, and now I'll go to about half of what's left. I'm going to put my tape just a touch further down. I never quilt all the way to the tape because I don't want to stitch it in, right? So again, it's just for my eye to see it, but I don't have to stitch right up against it. This is working out almost perfectly. These are not significantly smaller or larger. They're about the same size as I've been doing right along. I talk a big talk, but in reality, that last one is just too large. So we're going to squeeze 2 more in. And the truth is, if I end up going too deep on that bottom one, I'm just going to act as though I've got a barrier at the bottom edge, and I'm just going to chop off the bottom of that chandelier, right? Like I'm not gonna sweat over it. It's going to look like it's just seamless and runs right off the edge of the quilt, and I'm 100% fine with that. I'm not quite sure how I misgauged that in my thinking, but I did. So where I thought I was fitting in 3, I'm actually fitting in a 4th one quite handily. Now we truly are done with the painter's tape. Let's see if we can hit Mr. Producer this time. Got him! I'm apt to get one back on the side of the head, and it'll make me jump, and then we'll have a big lurch in the quilting. I'm happy to say he missed altogether. I saw it coming. It's not really fair to have a game like this going on when you're tethered to the quilting machine. He keeps picking it up and retossing it, and I can't really defend myself. Okay, and the final thing I'm going to do now is I'm going to pretend like there was a quilting line going on the bottom here, and I'm going to go back and put those loops in exactly where they would fall in the next row. You see how I'm doing that? And then I'm just coasting along on that basting line until I get to the next area that would show up in the quilting. I may even do it one more time because there's still a pretty sizable chunk between the chandeliers, like right in here, that's unquilted, and I think that's quite large. So I think I'll come back across one more time and add the tops of yet another group of loops in there. Because in the actual repeated design, the loops would be showing up in that area. This really varies from design to design, but my goal is to make it look like it just continued off the edge of the quilt. So whatever steps I need to take to make that happen or visualize that happening, you know, if you need to set your plexiglass sheet on and keep on drawing the design to see where would it have been, that'll help you visualize it. Yeah, let's go ahead and just put the 3 loops in here. You certainly could. I've seen digital quilters do this, just actually continue the design, extending off into the batting and then just trim it off. Personally, I prefer not to do that. I don't like to cut the thread a million times like that. I feel like that reduces the integrity of the stitching. My opinion, you know, maybe they find that that does not in fact happen, that nothing comes undone, but I prefer to just stop it within that basted edge and travel through the basting and try and make it look as seamless as I can, as continuous as I can. One and 2, and we're done. A few lock stitches. She's finished. Okay, fire off your questions if you have any more, or comments. Give one last thumbs up if you would to the episode if you've enjoyed this, and Mr. Producer will get me set up with a handheld camera, and I'll do my best to pan across this. Fortunately, down here in the border you actually can see it reasonably well, I think. Okay, so I'm going to be in the main camera while we do that. Perfect. So, fairly quick. I mean, I know it has been 3 hours, but I've done an awful lot of talking and, you know, extra little bits and bobs of stuff. And we've gotten a whole quilt done in that period of time. So, does it matter which side I have up? To my right? Okay. You guys ready for this? Okay, I see nothing on my camera. I'm just watching it on the screen. Okay. Mr. Producer says move really slowly. So I'm gonna pan up a little bit so you get an idea of the size of the piecing and the scale, right? And now we'll pan really slowly across that. Is that giving you an idea? I hope so. Of the size of it, the scale of it, and the pretty good overall coverage, overall texture. There's no, you know, large unquilted areas, no super fine areas. It's all pretty even. Chandelier. Pretty sure I said it earlier, but I'll say it again just in case. This design chandelier is one that's included in my freehand quilting masterclass. So what you can glean from it today, if you're not in that masterclass, be my guest to try that out. But if you want it in depth and in detail, that is where I teach it. So in that class, I always teach on a dark fabric with a light thread, high contrast, and walk through everything step by step. if you want to know more about that class, again, that's on my website, stitchedbysusan.com. Freehand Quilting Masterclass. You can find details there. So, do we have any more comments?
Lots of comments, no questions.
Okay, apparently no questions. Let's see a couple comments if there's some good ones. Susan, this is my first time catching this live. I've watched many episodes from the past, but it's so nice to be able to ask questions real time. It absolutely is. And a side note, if you usually watch these afterwards, you get YouTube ads after the fact. But if you watch live, I'm pretty sure you get to watch ad-free, which is awesome. So, some incentive to get here live. Karen, what pattern are you doing? Is it E's and L's and hard to see? Looks interesting what I can see. Yes, so I call it Chandeliers. It's one of my own designs or adaptations of a design. And it's included in my Freehand Quilting Masterclass. Yes, it's all L's and E's and 2 rows that kind of overlap to form this even coverage sort of design that I think looks like chandeliers hanging. Tammy, I love free motion because of the creativity. Yes, that is such a good reason, Tammy. And it's funny how even if you go quilt chandeliers, they're never going to look exactly like my chandeliers. And so even within that, even when we're quilting the same thing, we're still going to get that individual look. It's as individual as handwriting. It really is. I love that about it too. Okay, that's looking like it for comments or questions. You guys, thanks so much for joining me. Just a quick rundown. I try and do these live episodes twice a month. Oh, Debbie's saying, thanks, Susan. It's a beautiful design and your lives are so informative and inspiring. Have a great day. Thanks, Debbie. Appreciate that. We try and do these twice every month. It varies because I'm traveling. So good chance I'll be back again next Friday, the very first Friday of February. But I'll let you know in my newsletter. And these episodes always are aired entirely live and unedited, so you get to see the whole thing, all the oopses and whatever happens throughout. And I just chat through the process. This, as it so often is a client quilt. So please don't think of it as a lesson. I'm not literally teaching you how to quilt a design. I'm kind of showing you the big picture of working on a whole quilt and all that surrounds that, and you get to see the design used on a whole quilt. So appreciate you joining me so very, very much, and I will chat with you next time when we'll have another quilt, another design, another project.